persuade. To persuade with power. This is the 9th of the Competent Communicator, like I just said. One more speech, and this person will have completed all 10 speeches of the Competent Communicator Manual. The title of the speech is Lisa's Thoughts. Lisa's Thoughts, please welcome Lisa Hibler.
Fellow Toastmasters, I'm here to talk to you today about developing a secure sense of self. I think most of us have heard this lingo. Anyone who's read Psychology Today, picked up a self-help book, it's pretty common these days to hear about this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is, why it's important, and hopefully convince you to work on that a little bit within yourself. I have a tendency to say so if the ah counter could squeak me, Peter, if I say so, because I'm trying to work on that piece. As I was saying, most of us have heard that term, secure sense of self, and for a lot of people that I work with, and for a lot of us, we struggle with some insecurity and low self-esteem in certain areas of our life. There are some lucky people in the world who grow up in a really warm, wonderful, loving, secure, holding environment in their family, where their strengths are reflected to them, their value is reflected to them, and they're encouraged to follow their dreams and to be an individual. Not all of us have that, and sometimes when we don't have that, our sense of self can be a little bit impaired. Some of the qualities of a secure sense of self, I'm going to just list out a little bit, and maybe as I'm going through this, just think to yourself, okay, where do I fall on this list? Because most of us are really good in some of these areas and struggle a little bit in others. And when I'm working with clients, I like to educate a little bit on this piece, because I think for all of us, when we know what we're aiming for, it's a little bit easier to get there. And it helps to just articulate some of the concepts. So when we have a secure sense of self, then receiving feedback from others is a fairly easy thing. We can receive critical feedback, and that doesn't impact our sense of our own value or worthiness. We can also receive positive feedback, and that can feel good, but also that doesn't inflate us. So there's basically a congruent sense of self that exists, whether there's approval coming from the outside or disapproval. There's also an ability to pretty freely express our ideas in an unself-conscious way. So we freely share ideas, we listen, we talk freely, without second-guessing everything that we're saying or wondering if we said and did the right thing. We are usually able to take action in the world pretty easily and promote our creative ideas. Again, there's not a whole lot of struggle with that if we have a secure sense of self. We're usually able to face conflict straight on. I find that this is a hard one for a lot of us. There's not a whole lot of modeling around how to do this in our culture. But when there's conflict with someone, when there's an inner sense of security, we can face it head on, address it. There's not a lot of fear of rejection or shame or hurt that comes up, so we can go to the person directly and talk about it. We are also able to take in negative feedback, as I was saying earlier, without that really negatively impacting our core sense of self. Self-care is usually relatively important, valuing our health and taking care of ourselves. When we have a secure sense of self, it's not quite as hard to do. There's a little bit more willingness and ease with that. Also, being able to stand up for our rights, having a sense that we know what we deserve and that we have a right to a certain level of respect and fair treatment, and being able to advocate for that in situations is another important piece. Also, there's a piece around being able to really look for mutuality in relationships so that we're not over-giving in relationships if we're not also receiving in return. Some friendships and relationships in our lives won't always be 50-50 or perfect, but when there's a secure sense of self on board, we have a sense that we deserve that give and take and that flow. And we're less likely to end up in kind of codependent situations where we're overgiving or taking care of others at the expense of our own needs. There's also an important piece of recognizing and sort of honoring and knowing what we need and how we feel, being able to pay attention first to what we need and feel, and then respond to the needs and feelings of others. And this isn't selfishness, it's actually part of having a secure sense of self. And then there's also a piece about boundaries. Usually when we have a secure sense of self, our boundaries are clear, our self-boundaries, and we're able to articulate those pretty freely with others. And we don't feel a whole lot of shame and guilt about articulating that, even if it causes someone else some discomfort. So for many of us, we're good in some of those areas and we struggle a little bit more in others. And one thing that, or 5 things actually, that I work on with clients when people struggle a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these, it's the capacity to learn to be really present with yourself, with your own internal experience, to really develop the ability to self-protect. Sorry, I don't know what that was. To become a pillar of strength and certainty within yourself, to become your own wise parent, loving parent, and to really stay connected to a sense of possibility in your life. And so some of what's important about that is for a lot of people who don't have a secure sense of self, they just haven't been taught how to stay really in touch with their own feelings and needs and what's going on inside, or also how to stand up for themselves and protect themselves when there's a source of threat or when there's not respect coming from the outside. Also, for many of us, developing an internal parent is important, so that when those parts of us that are insecure and fearful and self-critical come up, we don't beat ourselves up, but we can actually talk to those parts in a kind way and not lose a sense of self, but just be really loving and caring towards those feelings in ourselves. And most importantly, I really like to help people stay connected to a sense of possibility in their lives. I think for all of us, there's a lot that's possible, and we all really deserve to go out there and flourish, not just survive, but thrive. And so the more secure your internal sense of self is, the more you know you really deserve that in your life, and the more you can take a stand for yourself around going out and creating that, which is so important to do and something I really work with all of my clients on. Madam Toastmaster.